and welcome everyone to the first installment of my newest Wrestlemania video series, a series of videos that will take us through the road to WrestleMania all the way to WrestleMania 34 later this year. Now, this series will be different from all the other ones I had done in previous years. This one will be focusing on honoring specific people from each WrestleMania event. This is going to cover the most valuable players and the least valuable players. I will be taking a look at every single WrestleMania and determining who contributed the most to each WrestleMania and which one detracted the most from each WrestleMania. I expect this to be fun. It's going to be 11 episodes. That'll be 3 WrestleManias per episode for those of you keeping track, and for those of you who are better at math than I am. And every WrestleMania to date will be covered as a part of this video series. So without further ado, let's get started. I used a random number generator do-wacky from Google to determine the order of how these WrestleManias are going to be covered. Rather than just do straight 1 to 33, I figured that would be boring. I figured I'd shake it up, do different WrestleManias for each episode, and we're going to start off with the WrestleMania that many consider to be the greatest WrestleMania of all time, WrestleMania 17. So who were the best and who were the worst? Now, I should start this off by saying that in determining who is the MVP and who's the LVP of each show, the MVP doesn't necessarily have to be a wrestler. It just has to be the one that contributed the most to making that WrestleMania a success, or contributed the most positively to that WrestleMania. And likewise for least valuable player. It doesn't have to be a wrestler to win that role. Could be an announcer, could be a referee, could be Vince McMahon, the promoter. Depends on the event and what the best aspect and worst aspect was of each WrestleMania. So it's going to run the full gamut of anybody who contributed to the on-air product that was that WrestleMania. So, who's the most valuable player of WrestleMania 17? Kind of a tough selection this year because there were so many really good matches and standout performances. You look at what Shane McMahon did in the street fight with Vince, what Vince McMahon did in that match. You could talk about all the side players in that, from Trish to Steph to even Linda McMahon and Mick Foley, the referee. You could look at the TLC match with all the different tag teams and the crazy spots they did. You could look at Undertaker versus Triple H and how well both men performed in that match. Even the gimmick battle royal, just like having Bobby Heenan and Gene Okerlund out there, was a standout moment. So there's a lot of positive things to point to at this WrestleMania, but I'm going to give the standout performance to Stone Cold Steve Austin, who, even though I disagreed with the heel turn in the main event in his match against The Rock, I think the match that these two had was not only an amazing main event, but it was one that sort of captured Austin's entire career in one match, and his character came off the stronger of the two in this particular contest. It also helped that the match was held in Texas and Austin was just mad over anyway. But little nuances like them repeating the bloodied sharpshooter spot and him doing the $1 Million Dream and a few other little touches like that just made for a very strong performance. And by the time WrestleMania was done, Austin was the one you were talking about the most. So I figured, okay, I'll give most valuable player to Stone Cold Steve Austin. Seems to fit. Also helps that he walked out as the champion. Again, I don't agree with the heel turn, but that was just something that became bad in hindsight. I think the night it happened, a lot of people were shocked, and it worked for the shock value at least that night. So, who's the least valuable player? Very hard to say this year because there wasn't really anything that stood out on this show as being terrible. Everything to some degree serves some kind of purpose, but I'm going to give least valuable player to Taz, who was having, he was thrown into a 6-man tag team match teaming up with the APA against the Right to Censor, a match that was pretty much designed as a filler match to give the Texas hometown boy Bradshaw a win at WrestleMania. To that end, the match served its purpose. Unfortunately, Taz suffered a concussion during the match, which led to a less than stellar performance. Not his fault, but it is an unfortunate thing. And he was kind of the bit player in a throwaway match anyway. So, there wasn't a whole lot of negative to point out on this show, but that unfortunately Again, it's unfortunate that Taz got hurt, especially on such a great stage where all the eyeballs are watching, but his performance didn't go very well, unfortunately, and for that, on a very strong WrestleMania, where it was very hard to pick a least valuable player, I'm going to give it to Taz. Now, the second WrestleMania I will be covering in this episode is Wrestlemania 4, the one with the big championship tournament to award the WWF Championship and crown a new champion after it had been declared vacant following the controversy of the Hulk Hogan-Andre the Giant Championship match. Now, this was not a very well-executed tournament, and as a result, it wasn't a very well-executed WrestleMania. So, you would think it would be hard to pick out an MVP, but if there was one standout star on this show, it was Macho Man Randy Savage. May he rest in peace. This was his night in the sun. He won the tournament. The main event itself was very memorable, and the finish and how it was all executed. The only other one I could see myself giving it to would be Ted DiBiase, who was the heel he defeated. For the hero to come out looking good, you need an obstacle to conquer, and I thought Ted served that role extremely well, cheating his way through the tournament, making sure that Hogan was eliminated so he wouldn't have to face him, having Andre as his bodyguard, his muscle to ensure that he would win the championship. Ted was very good in that role, so he would be my runner-up, but my number one is definitely Randy Savage, with Hulk Hogan standing in his corner and helping him win the title, and the end celebration was very memorable, and it was just Randy Savage's night to shine, and he definitely proved that he belonged there. And stellar performance was from him, and this was Randy Savage's WrestleMania. This was the one that was pretty much centered around him, so he's pretty much the most valuable player by default. Who is the least valuable player? I thought about giving it to George the Animal Steele for his performance in the opening Battle Royal. He stood outside the ring the whole time and then got eliminated by virtue of the fact that he'd never gotten in the ring and the referees just disqualified him through forfeiture or whatever. Very lackluster performance, to say the least. Very confusing to those of us watching from home. It was like, wait, why is he not getting in the ring? Wait, he's just gone now? So there was no payoff to any of that? Okay, whatever. But I'm going to give least valuable player, and let me preface this by saying this is not meant to be political. I swear to God, this is not meant to be political. I'm going to give it to Donald Trump, who hosted WrestleManias 4 and 5 from the Trump Plaza. Now, like I said, this is not meant to be political. I never fathomed that this man would become president of the United States, but that is the world we are currently living in 2018. And what I will say, though, if I were going to do a list of the worst WrestleMania venues, I would have to give it to Trump Plaza, and I don't know why they went back there for 5, because the show looked cheap, it looked low rent, the crowd was not very good, especially at 4. They had a hard time reacting to stuff for some reason. It just had a very kind of low rent circus tent look to it, and it's like, come on, it's Donald Trump, you can you can do better than that, right? I mean, come on. But for whatever reason, the venue looked terrible, and because he hosted the venue, I gotta give him least valuable player, because the show looked cheap as hell, especially coming off of WrestleMania 3, which looked larger than life and beyond what anybody could ever expect a wrestling show to appear as. To follow it up with 2 kind of low rent looking shows back to back is pretty disappointing. So I'm gonna give Donald Trump least valuable player based on the fact that he owned the venue that the show was hosted in, and it looked gaudy and terrible. So that is that. And moving on from there, the third and final WrestleMania that I'll be covering in this video, the most recent WrestleMania, WrestleMania 33. Now, who's the most valuable player from WrestleMania 33? Some people are probably not going to like this choice. I'm going to give it to Bill Goldberg. His match with Brock Lesnar far exceeded any expectation that anybody had for it. And it's funny, it went pretty much how we all thought it would, where it's like, all right, they're going to keep it short, they're going to hit their finishers, and Lesnar's going to get the win. Which is pretty much exactly what they did. They just did it in a way that was way more exciting and awesome than any of us ever thought it could be. There were some people who predicted how the match was going to be mapped out, and they were exactly right, yet it somehow worked and became amazing. And it was kind of cool that 13 years after they stunk the joint up at WrestleMania 20, both men were able to come back and have a show-stealing match at WrestleMania, and Goldberg was just fucking awesome in this. It was just pure robot cyborg killer Goldberg, classic WCW, something that they were able to capture in this most recent run that they were not able to capture when he came to the company the first time in 2003 and into 2004, except for rare occasions like SummerSlam 2003, minus the finish of that match. This was, if you're a Goldberg fan, even though he lost, this match was cool to see because it was like, okay, that's the Goldberg we all fell in love with. Like the Survivor Series match they had earlier the previous year. That's the Goldberg we all know and love. Just the super killer that just spears and jackhammers his way through anybody. The match was really cool. It was way more exciting than any of us ever thought it could be. And it was cool to see Goldberg put forth, a classic Goldberg-style performance one more time. And for a nostalgia act, it worked. And it was the best part of this particular WrestleMania. Runner-ups for MVP, I guess Lesnar would be an obvious choice because, it takes two to tango, and these two had an awesome match. AJ Styles would be my other pick. He opened up the show with Shane McMahon and had a really good match with Shane. Again, way better than anybody thought it could be. And it was nice to see AJ have like a really, really good match at WrestleMania. I think his WrestleMania debut the year before kind of left people feeling sour, mainly because he lost. But this one was like kind of the caliber of performance that you would expect from AJ on a major stage like a WrestleMania. So that was cool to see. For least valuable player, I had a few options to go with. I thought about giving it to Randy Orton, who had a shitty match with Bray Wyatt for the WWE title. I thought about giving it to Undertaker, who had a god-awful performance in the main event. But because they had, it was his retirement match, and they did end WrestleMania on that kind of somber note, it was like, all right, do I want to give him least valuable player since people walked away from the show talking about his retirement? It's, oh my god, what does this mean? It's like, all right, maybe I'll let that slide. And Roman Reigns, who was his dance partner that night, it's like, I almost feel like Roman was the poor unfortunate soul that got stuck trying to carry the dude. And Roman's not the type of guy that can carry guys. But why the hell he was put in that position in the first place, I don't know. But I'm not going to give it to Roman Reigns. I'm going to give it to Bray Wyatt because that match he had with Orton was basically a microcosm for Bray Wyatt's entire career in the WWE, where it's like, they've got cool ideas, they want him to be scary and spooky, but he's also booked as completely ineffective, and the spooky, scary stuff has no effect on people, and he just loses anyway. So he just winds up looking like a joke, and that's pretty much what happened here in this match. And even though he went in as the WWE champion, this was the match that pretty much confirmed for me, it's like, wow, Bray Wyatt's just dead in the water. He's just damaged beyond all repair at this point. And it's really sad that a character as hot as he was at one time has turned out the way that he has. And it sucks, but that is where we're at with Bray Wyatt. I'm waiting for the feud with Woken Matt Hardy to try and fix it, but that hasn't quite risen to the level that I felt like it's needed to. But again, that's a feud that might go all the way to WrestleMania, so we'll see. But this was the first episode of WrestleMania's Most Valuable Players, Least Valuable Players. Stay tuned for more. Like I said, it's going to be an 11-part series. We got 10 more to go. And I'm excited to finish this up. I think it's going to be a really fun series of videos, so stay tuned for more.